a prospect of greater prosperity, greater peace and tranquility in the Chattanooga area this year and in the next 30 years as well, even after you're gone from the scene, that there are things that are in place in human society because of you, because of what you did and the sacrifices you made. You, my listener here on the David Tula Show at 92.7 FM Nooga Radio. We argue for, as I say, local economy and the free market. The slogan, if there is one, is love your neighbor and buy local. It's 800-8949, 800-8949. What I try to do on the program here is to solve problems. I want to solve problems, and you can call me with a problem if you'd like to do that. Feel free. That is the number. And what I suggest you do is call me up and say, well, here's my situation. What can we make out of it? That is to say, me, David, your host here, and then the other listener out there who might want to hear about what you have to say. Okay, so if you pipe up on my number and join the program, we'll hear you out and then see what we can do by way of suggestion. And maybe just talking it out. Saying what your problem is, saying what your dilemma is, that itself is the mercy that the sum of your circumstances will bring to you. Just lining them all up in proper order and seeing each part in perspective, seeing each part of your problem in perspective. Sometimes that is the best thing. Just talking through your situation as you have often experienced it in the past in person. Talking things through is very satisfying, and to know that someone's listening to you. And after all, the best people are not the best talkers, I would like to suggest, but the best listeners. Now, we do have some constraint here on the radio in that there is someone else listening, and we need to kind of keep things moving. So I think in that, if you can work in that constraint, do think to give me a ring, 800-8949, 800-8949. We're brought to you by yournews.com. There's a couple of good stories this morning on yournews.com that I want you to make note of. One is the piece about Judge Alita Trauger. It is a summary of her arguments in a 79-page memorandum that is I would say a real treat. I've read almost the whole thing. And she is a federal district judge in Nashville, and she is finding that Tennessee's driver's license revocation scheme is unconstitutional. She hasn't nailed it down just yet, but she's in her memorandum. She strongly suggests that, well, there's room for a class action lawsuit against the state, and the state is an oppressive mechanism. And I want you to understand that Tennessee is not what the newspaper makes it out to be. When you read stories about politics, about the legislature, votes in the Senate, votes in the House, things happening that are, the new budget being passed. There's a story there that maybe if I get to it, I'll mention the state House passing a $37.5 billion state budget, the Senate voting today. You read stories like that, and in a way they're disarming, and somehow you think, well, that's, it's all fine and good, and what does it really matter? But the state that's just news coverage of state doings and legislative doings. I think is a way of disarming your sense of justice. Okay, and you think that, well, this is the way it is, and we have public schools, we have the scandal of hacking of the public school testing system. Oh, that's too bad, and so on. We somehow take the side of the state in stories like that, and we believe in the good intentions of Candace McQueen, the education czar in our state, and somehow she's really working for us, and she really cares for us, and we want the best for her. And that's what happens when you get a lot of media coverage under your belt in the morning or in the afternoon, and you're disarmed. You're disarmed by the routine things of the state, and not realizing that it is, in many respects, it is simply a predator. It is a predator organized by lawyers, and the predation is against the free market. It is against constitutional liberty. It is against openness. It is against fairness, and it is systemic. It is not just incidental. When you have the incidental bad traffic stop where people get shot or abused or killed, or Sheriff Eric Watson sends a sends his sheriff's attack dogs against an innocent man. As John Wolf's case tells about, he's the Chattanooga plaintiff's attorney who won a settlement of undisclosed terms with Bradley County's insurance company over an attack dog. Well, those things are not just here and there, right? They are occasional, but they typify the real story. And so I think these kinds of abuse stories, not suggesting rather something out of the ordinary, should rather suggest the ordinary at its very best, right? The ordinary at its very best, at its very highest, the type of narrative that breaks blood and breaks type, right, in the press, and shows the modern state for what it really is. The Alita Trauger story, her memorandum, which is reported today at yournews.com, in some detail, is about the deep state's interest in maintaining a civil death sentence, and that is through the most important part, I'd say, of commercial government today, and that is the driving and transportation regulation scheme. And in a nutshell, the driver's license statute and the whole control of the movement of the people by regulation and by law. Now, I say by law, and putting law in quotes, because it's not really by the law itself. The law itself allows for clarity on the distinction between travel and transportation. But the practice from Neil Pinkston over to Sheriff Jim Hammond, of course, Sheriff Jim Hammond's rival is exactly this, has the same opinion as he does on this matter. And also Andy Berke, the mayor of Chattanooga, and his chief, David Roddy, and also police chiefs in our municipal corporations in the area, that in Red Bank, that in East Ridge, and their mayors, they all think the same way. And that is that there is no distinction, and that transportation is the only way anybody can move by car, truck, or bike, or motorbike. Otherwise, there is no traveling. Traveling by car doesn't exist, and that practice is upheld by the Supreme Court. Okay, let's get it clear here. The Supreme Court of Tennessee and the courts of appeal uphold what is a legal fiction, and that is that there is no such thing as travel apart from the for-profit use of the road. And so what happens in our laws in Tennessee is that everybody has the same understanding, right? Everybody agrees that that's true, and it's taught in public school. It's taught by everybody you know. There's no dissent. There's no dissent on that point, except from me and a few other cranks, right? And we all know that you have to have a license to be on the road. We all know that there is no right to drive, and that's true. There isn't one. We all know that you simply are a criminal if you try to use the road at liberty to move your personal effects and for personal purposes and personal pleasures yourself on the road by car or truck or motorbike for private purposes, not making a profit. We all know that you can't do that, right? We all know that you have to be involved in transportation, and therefore you have to fall under the three legs of commercial government. That is to say, the driver's license, the registration of your car as a motor vehicle, which puts it into commerce and the stream of commerce, and then thirdly, compulsory insurance, which of course is a boon to the insurance industry given by the state. The state and the insurance industry are very, very close. They each create billions and billions of profit and revenues for each other. And all in commerce, and all by everybody being in commerce, and not there being private parties who are using the road privately, as has Rudy Soto Rodriguez and thousands of other people. According to an officer in East Ridge who spoke to Confederate Mike recently, half the people on the road don't have driver's licenses. Half. So that's a very large number. I disbelieve the number. I think that's too large an estimate. But I don't really know. But I know it's many. And many of them who don't have driver's licenses, or who have driver's licenses out of order, are in the categories that God protects and has a special care for. And that would be the widow and the orphan, the alien, the stranger, and the poor. God cares about those people. And when he clamors for justice and demands justice of the civil magistrate, it is on behalf of those first. and then everybody else can benefit from the care that the magistrate, the judge, is to give to them first. Remember the poor widow in the parable, demanding to be protected from her enemy by the cruel and wicked judge. Well, she's typical of defendants. She's typical of plaintiffs. She's typical of those injured by the system, by the machinery of government, the machinery of commerce, created by and rationalized by the wealthy and the great ones in our time. And my goal is to bring about a change of consciousness on this point. And that the point I'm making here is local economy. The argument of the show is local economy in the free market. So call me 800-8949, 800-8949 if you have a problem you want me to talk about, or maybe just to listen to. Now, sometimes the answer or the solution is really not as interesting or valuable to the other listener as your accounting of your problem. And so I just wanted to mention that, and to go a little further on this whole point about local economy. You know what the idea of local economy is. In fact, this show is about 5 years old, running on a commercial radio station, and it is about the solutions that conservatives say they offer, but really don't. There are no conservative solutions, I'm afraid, with even our great ones, Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity. They say they have solutions, but they really don't. They're really just talking about the news out of Nashville and important capitals, but they're not really about solutions. Solutions require, I would like to suggest here in the Chattanooga area, really being lococentric. In other words, thinking that local news and local developments and local problems are more important, and that we should really spend our time reading about them and focusing on them and trying to solve them. As an example, I offer my transportation administrative notice project. You can read about that at yournews.com and also at Nuganomics.com, the website for the man who matters. Not a very popular website, but it's a very important website because it looks into the deep state, and it looks at how particularly Christian people can solve problems of oppression. We have an oppressive system. We have great injustice every day in Hammond County courts. And police officers and sheriff's deputies routinely and abusively arrest people who are not subject to the law, So what I'm calling for is nothing outside the law. I'm just calling for a proper enforcement of law, so that the poor, the immigrant, the widow and the orphan, the African American, the Hispanic, might be spared tribulation, because going into court is a tribulation for common people. It is a tribulation for the poor. And I do thank you for your call. The number is 800-8949. And caller, what's on your mind?
Yeah, I'm going to take exception to that comment about Hannity, because he's one of the best hosts in the country, and you guys have him in the afternoon, and he does have solutions. It's a national show, and his national solution to problems is never, ever vote for a Democrat or a liberal. That alone will solve a lot of problems.
Well, then we have to vote for Republicans, right, Mike?
Well, I would say, yeah. I would say it's better than voting for unborn baby killers, which are Democrats. There's nothing more vile and pathetic than a Democrat or a liberal who in their platform they're okay with murdering unborn babies.
Yes.
So at least with Democrats, you have a chance of them turning the right way.
You mean Republicans?
No pun intended. So I would say 20% of Republicans are conservative, and I'll take the 20% over the liberal, slimy Democrats and liberals. And I think Sean's solution is no longer Republicans, but conservatives. And that's what Sean talks about. So that's one of the solutions on the national level, is make sure you're not electing slime balls. And I think he does have other solutions too. Now, the local solution is what you talk about, which is Nuganomics. But on the national level, I think Sean Hannity's on track. I think everyone should listen to him. That's my opinion.
Well, I agree. And I do think you, my listeners, should tune in to Sean Hannity. He's at 3 o'clock every day here at Nuga Radio. We're the only station for Sean Hannity. And we strongly suggest that you tune into him. He's just after the 2-hour Bloomberg Business News. That would be Bloomberg Policy, Politics, Power, and Law at 1 o'clock just after lunch. And then there's the Market Show with Charlie Pellet at 2 every day here, a real high-end program, and find out what's happening with capital flows around the world and big business, big companies, and, of course, the doings of elected officials. We don't have a free market. We have a political economy. And because we have a political economy that's discussed in detail every day here at Nougat Radio, I argue for Nouganomics, which is to say local solutions. And what's implied in that is, as the generous church luncheon yesterday suggested, is an expansion of grace and a reduction over time, a reduction of threat and force. Because in the end, the humanists who have seized control of the government and seized control of national culture, they really don't believe in liberty. They don't believe in the free markets, and they don't believe in the individual. They are collectivists. And so in their perspective, there's radical individualism. Kill your baby, don't be bound by the bonds of marriage, redefining marriage to include Jim and Joe in holy union as married, and the like on one hand. But these two contradictions really feed each other. If you have a personal anarchism, where you can screw around with whom you want without consequence, and you can kill your baby if one is conceived, and have no moral truth, no external moral standard by which to conduct your personal life, you have to have, in the end, a despotism. Despotism is required in your political theory because after all, we are all scattered and individualistic and anarchistic. Therefore, we have to have the unifying force, which is not the church, is not the gospel, it's not the Lord Jesus Christ as Christians believe. It is the state, and the state solves all problems. The state is where the best of man coheres in our ministries of education, our ministries of service, our ministries of regulation, our ministries of overcommerce.
AARP. I'm not wrong when I say it's fair to say
No, Mike is not wrong, and I do want you to tune into Mike Gallagher. That was him just bursting through here on the David Toulis Show. He's on at 11, just after the David Toulis Show. And this is David Toulis wearing his bow tie today. Maybe not the best match, but one still makes him passable with his frayed cuffed blue jacket. Now, if you believe, as I do, in local solutions, and you want to talk about a local problem or a local solution, just call me at 800-8949. 800-8949. The solutions they arise from people who are self-governing. And because of that point of self-government, I would say that we are a very pro-government station, very pro-government indeed. David Toulis here. I'm a great believer in government, but the one I want you to believe in too is self-government. If you are self-governing, that is to say, you take care of your own light bill, you take care of your own education bill, you take care of your own parents' bill, right? When they're old, and you don't play the Medicare poverty scam that the lawyers talk about, and have your senior impoverished by the time, or soon enough before the time they need to go into the nursing home, so that they can show by vow of poverty that they have no means, and that care of that person in that nursing home is on the state's dime, the national government's dime, as a poverty case. You don't play that game, okay? You take care of your old people, and you try to keep your old people out of the machinery of senior welfare as long as you can. You have a self-governing ethic, okay? And if you have enough people who are interested in self-determination and self-government and self-control, well, what happens? Over time, culturally, and it can't be done, you can't plan this out. It's just something that, by God's grace, happens over time. There is a falling away of these false claims of authority in welfare, in education, in other areas, in commerce. There's a falling away of the totalitarian scheme that has risen necessarily to replace Christian civilization, right? If you don't have Christendom and you don't have Christian civilization, you have the alternative is the humanistic welfare, warfare, surveillance, regulatory state with its public schools. You have to have that. It is inevitable that will be there. And you have, rather than a common law reality, you have a statutory reality. And I wanted to get to that if I can, after some important messages just ahead. And that would be the whole story about Tim Boyd, the commissioner, and Brent Lambert. Why is it that Brent Lambert can file a complaint and a criminal charge is being filed against a hapless county commissioner, Tim Boyd, who is merely having political conversation with his rival for office, and not committing an act of extortion at all. And yet, because we have a statute, because we don't have a common law ethic, we don't have a common law system of government controlled by the rules of equity. We have instead a statutory scheme that's called positivist law. Positivist law, to say it more clearly. We have a positivist law system which has effectively replaced the law of God and the common law system that we used to have. And in replacing that, what you have is you have barbed wire at every turn, and you have travesties such as the extortion statute, which is in the Tennessee Code at 3914-112. It's a single-page document, by the way. It's not a long thing, but it is
a couple
trap.
of weeks ago, and so he is being treated. He told
it's a trap for people such as Tim Boyd, and in fact, it's a trap for Brent Lambert. Brent Lambert has fallen into this trap as much as Tim Boyd, and the trap is bigger than them, right? We can't say that Tim Boyd is being victimized by Neil Pinkston, a thing that Brent Lambert did all by himself, right? Brent Lambert initiated a process which showed how large the mouth is, how sharp the rows of teeth
will you join me in keeping Bill Bunkley in your prayers as
how big that mouth is and how easily it is to fall into it. That is to say, the trap of a law system that rejects, in principle, God's law. And the reason it's important to note this is because in God's law, you can't possibly have a criminal charge over the kind of conversation that Brent Lambert initiated with Commissioner Boyd. It just can't happen because there is no real threat. There's no real threat to Brent Lambert's family, his career, his political career, or his business interests. He works as an official at a museum.
Your thoughts and prayers, put them on your prayer list.
There's no crime there. There's no tort there. There's no wrong there. There's no dead body. There's no injury in that conversation. There just was no injury at all. To say, and we'll get to it. But what I'm trying to get to is that if we don't have self-government, we have our culture, local free market culture, which we had parts of over in the past. That is replaced by an aggressive, militant, word-oriented, statutorily oriented, and centered system under which we live, right? We live under the system. It is over us. You might say a machine, which is the modern state with its claws, its hooks, its threats, its violence. It's a very violent organization and not pacific, not calm, not gracious, not soft, not quiet, not helpful, not merciful as God is. And as the civilization which God would ordain would be if we just wanted it. But we don't want it. See, we don't want that. We don't want an equity society. We don't want a fair society. We want a state-oriented and progressive society, and we have that. David Toulis.
After a briefly cool start, expect lots of morning sunshine for your Wednesday. Breezy, warm for the afternoon, highs near 80 tonight. Some passing clouds, can't rule out a breeze sprinkle, but not much. Lows upper 40s. Breezy, much cooler on Thursday, highs closer to 60. Sunny and mild Friday. Check out Glass Farm Nursery, now with a big assortment of tropicals, annuals, and perennials.